thank you very much. Today we have NJ Ayuk with us. NJ is the chairman of the African Energy Chamber and the organiser Africa Energy Week. Pleasure to have you with us, NJ.
It's an honor.
If you can just share with us who you are and what you do, I'll let you introduce yourself.
I'm NJ. I'm just a low country lawyer who fell in love with oil and gas, and I was born in Cameroon, grew up in Germany, United States, and got to go to law school and studied at a law firm, then got into the energy sector and just worked in the energy industry. And I became an energy enthusiastic about the energy industry. And
You're pretty much,
life.
I shouldn't have asked you for an introduction because you pretty much stole all my first questions. So share a bit about your background in West Africa and Cameroon.
Yeah.
You spent time in Germany and the US. How did those experiences influence your career? So
It did a lot. I always say Germany gave me my work ethic. United States gave me my commercial acumen, but also a great education that reshaped how I think, what should be done. And you felt like, if you get all this education and all this experience and you don't use it to really drive important issues, then it becomes a poverty and ambition.
And was it Minneapolis you done your degree?
I went to Mitchell College of Law in Minneapolis. It was cold there.
Yeah.
It was cold, but it was worth it.
Yeah.
I think that made me stay in class. So I rather than be on the streets partying, I stayed in class because it was too cold outside.
And were you a civil rights lawyer?
I started off as a civil rights lawyer. And I wanted actually to be a civil rights lawyer. I never, people always say, I'm Mr. Drill, Baby Drill. I never really liked oil. I thought they were crazy because that was everything that was told to me.
Yeah.
Because the narrative about the oil and gas industry was just negative, bad.
Yeah.
But again, civil rights was very important to me. I wanted to go into the tradition of a Charles Hamilton Houston, Thurgood Marshall, Johnny Cochran. So getting to civil rights work where you could really lift the little guy up, make the little guy become the big guy. That really drove me into a lot of that because we felt like, it's really important that we become, as what Charles Hamilton Houston would say, you have to make a decision if either you want to become a social parasite or a social engineer. And I felt that if you're going to have a beautiful law degree, you're going to have to decide to becoming a social engineer. And that has driven my life. And I think that same mindset has driven me into the work I do in the oil and gas sector.
Perfect. And then you started Centurion Law Group.
Yes.
How did that come about?
I think Centurion Law Group, it came from the need to do legal services across Africa. It was a big need. I started working. I had worked with the UN, and then I started working with a lot of companies, and the energy sector became so intriguing. And so I had these young lawyers with me, and we said, why don't we do it like what law firms like what you see being done in Europe, the United States, United Kingdom, where lawyers come together, drive up, provide good legal services into not just international companies, but African independents that are growing and wanting to do business better.
Was that a differentiator with other law companies?
I wanted it to be different because I think what I found is that I'd worked for a company and I was trying to hire lawyers. And for the first thing is that I always saw bad lawyering, and I hate bad writing. I just hate bad writing. I saw bad legal writing, bad lawyering, and it really troubled me. And I said, you know what? I can mix it up. I can mix it up with some of the big boys. And I think it was really, and I just felt I was ready. And I felt, you know what, if I put all this energy into it, I think something good can be happening. And where we are today as, when you look at Centurion Law Group, today's CLG, where it is today, it came from the sacrifice of a lot of people that really walked and felt to make it what it is.
Yeah, of course. And that actually is quite a good thing. So hurdles-wise, what was the challenges in you starting a fresh company, a Pan-African law company? How did you achieve that? What kind of problems did you come across initially?
People would say business development, earning trust of clients. I say no. You had to find good people. it was tough to find good people because you work in an industry that is heavily dominated by English language. Most of your lawyers don't speak English. But also how you think, find those great lawyers that could shift between civil law and common law, could really serve the African client and international client, break cultural divides, and understand that you got to get a rapid response system, 24 hours, do that, but then also be able to win and gain the respect of all the big players, that you would get your job done in time without them worrying about any kind of issues. So you had to overcome some of those stereotypes that were there with good work.
You spoke before, but you mentioned their divide, but you spoke about skepticism due to color of your skin.
Yeah.
So how big a challenge was that?
It was, but what you look is that if you get to worry about that, then what happens then is that you fall into that soft bigotry of that soft bigotry of low expectation.
And does that become a focus rather than
It becomes a focus. It takes you away. You have to keep going. Somebody might be responsible for you being down, but you're not responsible for you not getting back up.
Yeah.
Take the shots, but if you can look up, you would get up. And I think those barriers were there. Once you start to deliver, once you start to understand that you are performing at a level that is better, all that stuff goes away. And I think that's what the biggest problem you would have is get stuck on the low, thinking this is what it is. Because people who think like that, they get stuck there.
Yeah.
When you think at a level and saying, I got this, man. Heck, I was the first Black kid to be president of my student, my law school, and it wasn't a bunch of white and Black kids that elected you. We're nothing but like 5%. It was a lot of white kids that would, because you know what, I was qualified.
Yeah.
You put it out there, and you meet all people, but when you get in there, you just realize all of God's children are the same. They just want to get things done. And if you can deliver, believe you me, nobody cares about that stuff.
Yeah.
They want you to deliver. And that's what I think. And I think that kind of expectation is what we should set for our young people today, be it in Africa or Europe. Don't let people divide you by complaining. Nobody listens to you if you're complaining. Everybody's like, go away with your bad luck, because they want to get something done.
Perfect. And then, so that's on the negative side. What's been the positives? What was the most rewarding things with Centurion Law Group and getting that up and running?
The most rewarding thing for me, I think it has been out of education. We got a lot of young lawyers in Africa, got them to the United States, got them to Europe, got them trained, and brought them back to Africa. But I also think that being able to have advice on some of the biggest cases in the continent, we've negotiated more oil and gas contracts than any law firm in the continent. We've advised governments, we've advised corporate entities, we've advised independents in the sector. But you know what? We've even done hostage negotiations.
Wow.
And so we get the feeling of seeing people who've been taken hostage in some countries and them getting back to their families, and that is actually more rewarding than any kind of billable hours or fees you make. And I think sometimes we get caught up into worried about if I scored big here or I didn't, but it's the people. You get a lot of people who became our clients, became our friends, they became champions of our firm. It was guys who left the North Sea and went out to Africa, working in distant shores, and they knew that their freedom or what they do or their business relied on the services we provided to get them to be successful. People left the Gulf of Mexico, setting out for distant shores, knowing that the only thing I got here is that I got this law firm that got my back.
Yeah.
And you look at him and say, Cham, I got your back. We're going to get it done. And when they believe in you, they trust your word, and you do everything to get it done. So you move away from not just being a legal advisor, you become a trusted advisor, and you carry the whole damn thing, and you get the job done.
Perfect. And with regards Centurion, you recently stepped down as CEO. What was the reason behind that?
Kenny, I'm old, man. I'm old.
You're 46.
Yeah, but I was 44 years old. I thought I'd run my race. I fought the good fight. you know. But I also think something for me. Leave when I think it's a leadership lesson. Leave when it's at the right time. You have to create space for other leaders in whatever you do.
And how would you describe your leadership style?
Oh man, some call me a dictator. Some call me a tyrant. I think I'm tough. I'll be very honest. I'm very tough, and it's not just that I'm tough on people. I'm tough on myself, because I think I like to work with people who have a better work ethic than me. So if I'm putting 16 hours a day, I expect people who work with me to put in 17.
But I mean, we tried to communicate via WhatsApp. You phone me at 10 o'clock at night or whatever.
Yeah. I'll call at 1 o'clock at night.
And every time I start a conversation with you, you're in a different country.
Yeah.
So I don't know many people with the work ethic like that. Then you got a family as well too.
I got family, but that's the only way to get it done when you're building something. And I think I'll be very honest. I tend to struggle with these woke types, this new generation that they want to have their almond milk at 9 o'clock, and they need a goat cheese at noon. They need a cigarette break at 2:30, and at 4:30 they out there at their door and everything. I think it doesn't work like that. I was trained to say you start in the morning. If you have to just exercise, you exercise, but you stay there till you get it done. That's how you build. And I also think you got to lead by example. You got to build from bottom up, and you got to empower people to.
And you were raised by a single mom?
I was raised by a single mom.
So do you think you got that work ethic?
You know,
Early on?
a lot of that from Harvard. I think my grandma also shaped me a lot. You know,
Okay.
my grandma didn't study biology or zoology, but she knew sticology and she knew slapology. She was tough. She would whoop your behind to get you on track. That's just what grandma did. She was the toughest. But you know what? That's a different generation. You know, this generation, you know, thou shalt not touch.
Yeah.
You know, so it's very different. But again, you have to find different ways to work with young people.
Yeah, and you talk about empowering young Africans. How do you achieve that? How do you drive that? How do you encourage that?
Because the first part of it is that cut out the entitlement. I think a lot of young Africans and even Europeans, even Americans, it's a generation of entitlement. They feel like the world owes them something. Nobody owes you anything.
Yeah.
Okay. You only get out what you put in. You know, garbage in, garbage out. And the feeling that, oh my God, somebody did, you go back in history and you say, well, you know, they colonized me and all of that stuff, and this happens to me. Cut that nonsense out. You know, nobody's listening to that. The first thing is that you got to get something done. You got to have something to prove. And it's not just because you have some fancy education and all of that stuff. You're not the first person to have a degree or your pedigree. But you know, what have you done?
Yeah.
What have you accomplished? And I think for me, I love young Africans. I'm the first to open them doors into, I'll call a corporation, try to open them doors. I also bring them into what I do. But you know what? I want to be tough on you. And I'm going to be tough on you. And if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen.
Yeah.
Because this is the smoker's lunch, man. If you can't handle it, then get out. Because, you know, you might not like it, but that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
That's the world we live in. Because the world we live in today, nobody is waiting for you. It's not just going to be like somebody say, well, you're young, you're African, so here's a check. No.
Yeah.
You're young, you're African, you got to work double.
Yeah.
And if you have that mindset, then you're going to get it done.
Okay, so perfect. So we kind of discussed the leadership style, we've discussed Centurion. So the reason how we met, or how I know you, is from the African Energy Chamber and AEW. And one of the things you push for is Africa's energy independence. How do you see that?
You need energy independence in Africa. When you have 600 million people without access to electricity, 900 million without access to clean cooking technologies, most of them women, and you don't have energy sovereignty, you cannot provide energy security for them, then you're in trouble. Because energy is life. You know, I mean, you realize that we are in a point where we are begging for food from Ukraine, a country at war, when we can use natural gas. And I know natural gas kind of like a Swiss knife. You can use it to do a lot of things. You could do urea, ammonia, NPK, fertilizer plants, and look at the vast land, power Africa, use fertilizers to develop agricultural bases, just drive up economy so our young people don't have to go to Europe. So energy independence for Africa, to me, I think is the most important thing that our generation can do, because when we provide energy, people have life and people have a fighting chance to have possibilities.
And what's the initiatives or projects that AEW's or the African Energy Chamber is involved in?
One of the key things which we've done is that we've looked at, first of all, we believe in free markets, limited government, and individual responsibility. The only way you're going to have energy independence and energy security in Africa is when you empower the private sector to lead and drive. So you got African private sector. They will look at what are those above ground risk issues, what are those red tape issues. So you get issues around bureaucracy. You have issues where you still find us with transparency issues, mismanagement issues. We have issues which you have to really take a look at and say, how we get deals done. It takes so long. It shouldn't take so long to sign a deal and the time you need to complete that project. So we said, private sector, this is what you have to do, but the chamber, we are going to lobby the government so hard to break those issues that really create a fiscal it creates us a fiscal problems, but also make it difficult to do business. Because you know what? When you unleash Africa's true potential by getting bureaucrats and government out of the way, making it easy to do business, believe you me, everyday Africans, small businesses, independents, working with their European, American, Asian partners, they're just going to drive things because you have just unleashed true potential. Cut taxes, man. Like, why are you charging for too much taxes for politicians to spend?
Yeah.
So we need to create that environment that it makes it refreshing to walk in.
And you mentioned small businesses. So for a young African entrepreneur, what would be your advice for him? And maybe that will change from country to country around Africa.
My advice for him is that believe in the energy sector. When you have a sector where you have 600 million without access, that's already a business plan, because there is a problem.
There's a market.
Be innovative to create that problem. This generation of this is in Africa there where we could go from landlines to cell phones.
Yeah.
We could go from not having any connection with internet to being on TikTok and Instagram and WhatsApp and all this social media. So we can actually get to places where these young Africans today, with so much innovation that is around them, coding, they are doing it way better than even their European counterparts. An emphasis in math, it's there. So my advice to a young African entrepreneur is that we need more PhDs, not PhDs. Be that PhD that really gets stuff done. When you get stuff done, believe you me, the money would follow. Don't go for the glamour, because you know what? Most of the stuff you see on those 30-second TikTok or Instagram, it's a show. Really focus a lot on getting that great to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning and you push yourself, do your sit-ups, do your push-ups, get into your stuff. But when you make that first $1 million, don't get on the plane to Europe or to the United States and start looking how you buy a jet or buy the fancy things. Put it right back in your business and strive to make 10, 20, 50 and everything, because the world is watching you. They'll be cheering you when you're doing well, but believe you me, they'll be jeering you when you're doing well, when you're doing bad. Yeah. So you want to continue receiving the cheers, not the jeers.
Yeah, perfect. And then the African Energy Chamber, there's Africa Energy Week, which is the largest show in Africa now for oil, gas, and energy transition or just transition. You pretty much created that. How did that come around? Because there was already an existing show there, so.
No, it wasn't existing. I think COVID came, Africa All Week went to Dubai.
Yeah.
And they were scared. I'm like, come on, there's COVID in South Africa. But, the whole world was facing that. Our biggest problem was, listen, you could have done this conference anywhere across Africa. If it doesn't work in South Africa because of COVID restrictions, fine. Go to Dakar, it was open. Go to Mauritius, go to Morocco. Africa is beautiful from Cape to Cairo. You got everybody in there from chalk to charcoal. You find some place that you're going to do this.
Yeah.
But then it was like, no, we're going to Dubai. And I think it represented something where I think we've seen with a lot of international companies that talk to Africans, but they don't talk with Africans. Maybe sometimes it's better to listen. You know, two guys on the phone booth decide that this is what they're going to do and this is what is good for you. I think Africa has changed. They want to be listened to. They want to be talked with, not talked to. And when we did that, we realized that, okay, you know what, we'll host it. I believe you me, I thought we were going to fail in 2021. You know, it's just like, I thought we were going to fail. I really believed that this was going to be a fiasco. And so I was ready to take my potatoes thrown at me. But we just went in there with great. And I think I've literally spent 4 or 5 months on the road, went saw every African minister, every African NOC, met African heads of states, met with everybody who would listen. Some people rejected me, some people accepted, but we got it done. And in 2022, it picked up. Then by 2023, the game was over.
And what was the numbers in the first year?
The numbers the first year, we had about 1,400 people.
Wow, that's still good numbers.
I was
always in the conference center.
No, it wasn't a conference center. We weren't allowed in the conference center. You know,
Okay.
Somebody blocked us from going to the conference center. So I didn't have a conference in that. So what I did is that I went to the waterfront in Cape Town. And
Lovely.
I said, you know what? I ran a coffee shop. I ran an aquarium. I picked everything you could have at that whole scattered conferences all across the waterfront.
Yeah.
Because you got to be innovative. You got to think different, because the standard in there was you get a conference center and you walk there. So when you don't have a conference center buy you out, no, I wasn't going to say I'm out. So I said, listen, we're going to take every freaking shop. And I even took a nightclub and I hosted a conference in. But people liked it. It was something different. They could walk around the waterfront from place to place. Some got a little bit tired. We had little bikes which people could move around, and the numbers grew.
Yeah.
And I think the city of Cape Town found out that we brought in a lot into the city, because every time you hosted African Energy Week, the hotels are all sold out.
Yeah.
But you know what?
The bars are busy.
The
restaurants are busy.
The restaurants, bus boys, a lot of young girls partying, young boys partying. The evenings are packed, and there was money going around. And I think that's really what we have to look at doing this across our continent, is that it's not just a conference only. You have to look at the economy around the conference.
Yeah.
That economy around the conference created jobs, created opportunities. A lot of African vendors. Cape Town has a well-established vendor list with these guys who were coming out of COVID. It was tough.
Struggling, yeah.
We were the first ones to come give them jobs and give them opportunities and pay for that. That works. And to me, that's really what it matters here. Getting these African vendors to do world-class work and demanding hard of them.
Yeah.
And, I just want you to do it so well. I want you to do it better than your European counterpart. Don't come tell me that this is an African conference, so you're not going to do it well. No, I refuse to accept that, because I think, listen, I want excellence. My brand is excellence. I want to be better than any damn thing out there.
Yeah.
And when you set the standards so high, it is easy to beat everybody, because you are tougher on yourself. Out there moaning and complaining about why you need to get this stuff done. And I think I'm happy with the team around African Energy Week, because they work their souls out.
Yeah.
They just work their souls out. You didn't have people who sit back and complain,
Is that because of the dictator running the company?
It was a little bit of a tyranny.
Yeah.
You build like a cult. you get a little bit of a dictatorship, you get a tyranny, you get a little bit of a cult. But I think the fact of the matter is that people believed.
Yeah.
When you believe in it, we had a rallying call. We said, this is our moment to really create an African energy movement. It was bigger than a conference. And I think the companies believed in us, because we weren't just talking about, let's just get energy for Africa. We challenge our governments.
Yeah.
People always think, oh man, you challenge people for global governments and global energy justice. No, we challenge our governments like, hey man, you're not competing between Mozambique and Angola for money. You're competing with Guyana.
Yeah.
You're competing with Suriname.
You've been involved or advised governments on judicial modernisation and change. How important is that to you, and how difficult is that?
I think it's difficult because sometimes the old things always don't change, but then you have to always remind people that the only good thing about the good old days is that they're gone.
Yeah.
So what happened in the past, that's reference, not residence. Right now, we got climate change, energy transition, capital. You can't find enough capital for upstream oil and gas or even renewables in Africa. So you know what you got to do? You got to think green. It's the fiscals. So you sitting with government and saying, it's not these guys from Europe or United States, not these white guys trying to take from you. I'm as African as they get, but I'm telling you, you're not going to get that money if you don't give the right tax incentives, if you don't have the right processes to move fast, if you don't look at streamlining, so if you don't try to streamline your regulatory processes, your licensing processes, if you don't cut away from some of the bad acts of the past, it's not going to happen. And sometimes it took an African to be able to sit in the room and say, that's how this is what works. And believe you me, I am doing this in the best interest of you, because that's the only way we're going to be able to attract capital. Why would it taking sometimes 5-6 years to approve an oil and gas project? You realize that we have 56% of discoveries in Africa are not producing because either we've started negotiations, we have bureaucrats holding things behind. These are unelected people. They're just holding things behind. So you're not moving.
Why?
I think part of it has always been a little bit around resource nationalism, because we always think that they're coming to take this from us. No, you know what? This is a signed field of contracts. We signed a deal. I signed a deal with you, Kenny. We got to respect it.
Yeah.
You sign a deal with somebody, person comes in saying, okay, you got 80%, I got 20, 90, I got 10. Person takes the risk, takes the exposure.
Yeah.
And then when you get to discovery, you say, well, it's our oil. Of course it's your oil. It was your oil when you had it was 3,000 meter depth, 2,000, 1,000 meter depth. It was your oil. But the problem is that you just didn't have the technology and the financial wherewithal like what BP has, or Exxon, or Chevron, or Cosmos, or Perenco has. And so when they get in the room and they are able to do it, you get benefits.
You win.
It's a win-win.
Yeah.
You get your royalties, you get your cost oil, you get your taxes, but there's something even bigger. You become an address for more exploration, for energy.
More money.
More jobs to everyday people, because the money that goes to the treasury or the politicians, you don't see it.
Yeah.
But everyday people start getting jobs.
Yeah.
They start becoming, now you move people from working class to middle class, lower class into working class. But you know what's even better? You increase your tax base, because now these citizens are paying taxes. You reduce crime because people are getting jobs there, because at the end of the day, remember we talked about young people and young Africans, there is dignity in work.
Yeah.
You're no longer relying on aid. People in Africa today, go around, talk to them. They don't need a handout. They need a hand up. They need a hand up. That's what this industry brings. The largest taxpayer in Africa today is an oil and gas company called Total Energies. That's the largest taxpayer. The largest taxpayer in the CIMAC, Central African region, is an oil and gas company called Perenco. They pay huge amounts of taxes, but those multiplier jobs, because they exist, because they are there, because business is moving.
Yeah.
We're building hotels, the boss boy is getting a job.
The supply chain.
The whole entire supply chain.
Yeah.
And that is what we must be focused on doing, because we have to look at it again. The demonization of oil and gas is wrong. The demonization of these companies, it's wrong. And when we make it difficult for them through this demonization and resource nationalism, what happens? We lose everything.
Yeah.
It becomes slow. You were in Ghana last year. Give an example. Tulo discovered in Ghana and Uganda 3 months apart. 3 months apart. Guess what? The Kenyans moved. In 3.5 years, they started producing. Uganda, they started arguing about transfer pricing and VAT and every kind of stuff. Guess what?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So it took 17 years, and then 17 years later, or 18 years later, what happens later? Greta Thunberg shows up and she starts saying, don't build a pipeline. You know, there's climate change right now. But that's 17, 18 years of value lost.
Yeah.
We cannot continue losing that value in Africa. We need to get that value out today. That's why I say drill, baby, drill, and produce every drop right now and get people out of poverty.
And how different is it from part of Africa to another part of Africa? It's not each of these countries, like you said there, Uganda and Ghana, one got up and done it, the other country hasn't produced nothing. How difficult do you find that from African Energy Chamber when you maybe you go to one country or you're speaking to a government and feel like there's real drive or potential there, but the next time you got another meeting and you're just banging your head against a wall?
Yeah, Africa is not a monolith. I think our history and cultural differences sometimes shape how we do business and how we engage it. You know, when you talk to a Nigerian, they're like, they're aggressive, they're like, you want it now, you know, and then when you go to Uganda, they're like, hey, take it easy. You know, what's your name? Who your daddy? You know, so it's very, very different. But you go in Francophone Africa, very different. Anglophone Africa, very different. So you got to navigate this, and even North Africa, and even within the countries, because cultures and everything. So you have to be able to understand these differences. But you know what? Out of our diversity, we are stronger, and we need to be able to use that. But the other thing also there is that differences around countries does not matter. Because at the end of the day, for me, it's all about the Benjamins. There are people in poverty. There are people in energy poverty. There are people who don't have electricity and all of that. If Chevron can figure out how to work in Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea, Angola, I think we as Africans should be able to negotiate with Exxon, Perenco, and Total, irrespective of our differences. You know, sometimes set those differences aside. There is no problem that if you sit around the table and you're honest, you can't get a deal done. If you can't get a deal done, don't blame the other guy. You're just a bad negotiator.
Yeah.
You're just a bad negotiator because their resources are everywhere. So you just have to be good at what you do. And if you don't have to, if you don't know something, ask for help. Ask for help. We wouldn't get here without other people helping us. Like, listen, so you just ask for help, and I think governments have to do that.
Yeah. I mean, we spoke about the West African Energy Summit, or the wider African Energy Summit now in Aberdeen this year, and that's one of the key things that you identified as an opportunity for that event, or for African countries attending that event, is the fact that the innovation, the technology, and the decades of experience from Aberdeen now in Africa.
Yeah. I think it's amazing, you know. I think some of the first people I met in oil and gas came from this city, and a lot of Africans have gone to school in this city. I had a young lady who worked for me. She went to school in this city. She's a great lawyer and great human being, Adaku Ofere. She was just adorable. She worked with us, then she decided to go the other way. She went and joined USAID. Trump shut that thing down, and now she does a lot of beautiful work with Mission 3000. Those kind of people, those kind of drivers that came out of this city are doing very, very well for the future. You got, I mean, the head of the Association of International Energy Negotiators, Shakwanyambe, young Namibian, went to school in this city. So this city is producing not just oil and gas, but producing leaders that are going to drive the continent in the future. And not just the continent. I mean, this guy Shakwa is running a global organization. I'm a member. But I think this city is doing that. But beyond that, you've had engineers, but also something, you know what? I think about the future. The greatest and best technologies in carbon capture and in drilling, and also geoscience, is kind of schools around here. And those kind of technologies are even better. You see what you guys do in offshore here. Africans wanting to have partners in the future. They better be coming here because this is the hub. This is where you find it. That's why for me, I was very excited when you talk about bringing this summit right here in Aberdeen. I think it's an amazing moment. Instead of just talking about going into a financial district in London, which we need financing, don't get me wrong, but having those drivers that are going to take fields that are 3, 4, 5,000, bringing technologies, doing haze oil recoveries, turn marginal fields and doing better, but do it in a sustainable, friendly way. This city is going to represent, it represents that. And I think Africans have a chance to tap into this and do even better.
And when you speak about the future, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for Africa for investment in energy moving forward over the next few years?
Man, everything. You know, this is to think about it. You know, we just think sometimes about upstream. Look at pet cans. You know, I just talked about our food crisis. You know, if you don't have fertilizer, 50% of the people in Africa will be dead without fertilizers. We don't think about that. Without fertilizers, 50% of Africans would be dead because they would have no food, except you would have to get food aid from outside. But also, look at it this way: our refining capacity is shrinking over again and again and again because our energy infrastructure is bad. Look at our refining. Just to fix African refineries, just to fix them. I'm not talking about building new refineries. You're going to need about $20 billion just to get them back up to date, and they should be running. So those kind of investments in storage facilities, bunkering, downstream, so important so that we prepare for the future. Some countries don't even have strategic reserves that if you don't have products today, past 30 days, it's a national crisis. It would affect stability in the countries. But also look at the ability to go from here, train people, get them to work offshore, whether it is welding, whether it is journeymen and landsmen, and getting them to just do stuff onshore as well. So much opportunities that to really look at. But look at midstream. We're in a chance where people now not just looking at LNG trains, they're looking at floating LNGs and with these technologies. But something has become a big, I became a big fan of it. AI in energy. How do you optimize production?
Yeah.
I mean, this guy's I've gone into stuff, look at some of the stuff they do with AI. Fields where you drilled 20 years ago, you couldn't find a spot, you do it today, you're getting good discoveries because of the role of artificial intelligence in geoscience.
The information, sensors, everything.
It's doing it so well. It's making drill. I mean, that's why we're going to find so much oil in Africa, because now you got technology really driving this. So if I was a young African, and you know, more young people say they want to go work for Google or Amazon, they don't want to work for Exxon or Chevron. No, go work for the oil companies, because the technologies they're driving, they are driving technologies of the future.
Yeah, well, we spoke to Exxon at our business breakfast in Houston, and it was the head of Microsoft who was also speaking, and they've been partnering for many a year.
Yeah.
And the information that they've developed and working on is surreal.
And that's the point. So look at R&D. We need to start looking at this city, what has happened here in Scotland. I start saying, where do we have our R&D centers around Africa that really drive this? And get our young people that they're more tech savvy. You know, they really want to get into it. You got all these nerdy types, you know, get them to do stuff rather than run the streets and create new problems, you know. Get them in their room, let them do all that tech stuff, and then let's produce more oil, because you know me, I'm not against producing oil. I want to produce every drop of hydrocarbons. So if we can get that done, I think look at that, those opportunities, that's going to drive the future.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. Just away from the work side, NJ, you literally travel all around the world. You're in Joburg, you're in Mozambique, you're in Cape Town, you're in Austria, you're here today in Aberdeen, you're in London tomorrow, you're somewhere else. How do you manage that?
It's tough. I think the biggest victim of this is my family. You know, like
you have a wife and
I got a wife and 3 kids.
Three
It's
kids.
tough to see them. You know, sometimes you miss birthdays because you're on the road. Sometimes you miss anniversaries. Because
Your wife's chuffed with us.
my wife, I mean, she's the greatest human being. Without her, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And I think her having my back and giving me the support, and also just ensuring that kids are okay. But she herself is also, if we're doing a full-time job with a lot of travel, she got her own stuff. So sometimes you got to manage that. But you know, one of those things which, you don't get to talk about because everybody, they see on TV, they hear on the radio, they see on the paper. It's a tough, tough job doing this and managing family, and also having to really ensure that your colleagues, employees, whoever, they're okay and really delivering. And then you got to do the climate activists who are out there every day. I love them. I love them. It's like the greatest gift that could have come to me was Greenpeace. They take a shot at me every day. They write all kind of crazy stuff, but it comes with the territory. When you do this, you got to get some thick skin. You got to be very, very, you got to be tough.
Yeah.
It's not for the faint of heart. It's not for the naive. You have to really believe in it. But also, you know what? I really believe in what I do, because I know that my children should have the same opportunities that a child in the township should have. And that child in the township should have even better opportunities than my children. And it can only happen if we create that. So we got to think about doing something bigger than our own personal interest. So I'm not worried about Greta. I'm not worried about Greenpeace. I actually think they like me, because I'm like them.
You give them something to talk about.
I give them something to talk. I think we have the same character. The only thing is that I'm right and they're wrong. So that's the only thing that annoys them. So I think they like me. They just get angry that I'm right.
Yeah.
But because at the end of the day, I got people without electricity.
Yeah.
I got people without energy. I got these young people whom their only shot is to cross the Mediterranean and come to European streets, and I'm saying, no, stay in Africa and get work. So they should be happy to me, because I become the most anti-immigration person, because I'm doing that to keep people right there to work right at home and build things at home. Because at the end of the day, you know what? Our job is to make a little guy become the big guy. And our families take a big, big shot, big hit on that. But I think it's worth it, because some of us have to be dedicated to really doing this and driving this and pushing this and putting Africa on the global agenda. And again, I just came from OPEC, coming in here. I mean, it's really important. We are at a time where, like I always talk about this one, energy justice, climate change. Some people use energy and did very well. And we're proud of them, because energy, oil industry has driven human flourishing. It has made us better, and we should never be ashamed of the oil industry. I think right now the problem I have when I'm in Europe is that they kind of make you feel like that the oil industry, the cause of problem. No, the oil industry is going to drive the future. It is going to, the oil industry is going to reduce our issues around climate change, because they're going to develop technologies of the future. They're going to drive that. So we should be backing that industry. We should be actually giving incentives to the oil industry to do more innovation and really fix the problems that we have, rather than demonizing. I think my biggest problem is that in Europe, the demonization of oil and gas is just too much. Some people don't even want to say, I work in oil and gas, and that's wrong.
And why is that? Why do you think that is?
Because you have because you have a climate cult that it's all about climate change and everything, without looking at the totality of the circumstance. We need some pragmatism. We need common sense. You had a crisis in Ukraine and Russia, and then they said natural gas is green because we need more gas. We opened coal-fired plants for the first time in 30 years. We need to be very, very firm. And the oil and gas industry, we need to speak up. We need to stop acting as if we're like soldiers coming back from a lost war. We are that industry that has driven human civilization, driven people to have longer life expectancy, and really got into open places in the world where nobody would have been going there. So you can't turn this industry and the people that work in there, people sending out from distant shores, young boys in the North Sea, going into Nigeria, going into Equatorial Guinea and Angola, and teaching other people and everything. They are real creators of development than the NGO aid worker who shows up there acting like a white knight there to save people. No, you're not doing that. We have to really give this industry the credit it deserves. And personally, I get very offended when I see them criticize an oil man. I think when an oil man comes, you need to tell them thank you. instead of insulting these people because they put their lives at risk. How are you going to like a firefighter and then hit an oil man? Doesn't make sense, because everything that really stopped that fire in that building, it comes from oil. It comes from oil. How are you going to love a doctor and then hate an oil man? And look at that hospital, the syringes, the plastics, the everything, the medicine comes from oil. So greenhouse gas emissions, reduce them. But hate oil? No. We need to find a way to drive this thing, and that's why this city is important, that we defend the industry, protect its gains, but advance it in a sustainable, cleaner, better. Nobody loves the environment more than we do. We love the environment. We want everything that works. So I think the reason you have that in Europe today is because something very easy. People have moved from drinking. I lived in a hotel in Vienna. They don't have full milk. They had oat milk, almond milk, and skim milk. What about full milk? That's the culture. You got to eat goat cheese. You got to eat tofu and all of that. And what's the other one they eat today? Beyond Meat.
Okay.
How about
Fake
just
meat.
fake meat?
Yeah.
You know, how about just grab the hell out of the steak and cut it and eat a steak? Now you got to eat fake steak. And so fake now becomes real. And then you bring these renewables with these wind turbines that don't work. And then you start saying, look, let's use fake energy with all the intermittent nature of it. We need development in the world. And so you know what we need? We need base load energy. And that base load, you get it from clean gas. That's why Europe says natural gas is green. I believe natural gas is green, so I accept it.
Perfect. We'll finish it there. Brilliant. Thank you very much, NJ. Appreciate it.